In this video, we'll be comparing various data speed caps and how the different data speeds impact performance for sending and receiving emails, watching YouTube videos, and even streaming music. All the way on the left here, we have LTE. This sort of represents the control for what the experience would be like under typical conditions. Next, we have a 512 kilobits per second data speed cap. This is typically considered around 3G speeds. You can see this in plans like T-Mobile's Magenta plan, which offers unlimited hotspot that is capped at 3G speeds. Next, we have 256 and 128 kilobits per second. These are often considered 2G speeds. Many plans include unlimited 2G data after your high-speed data allotment is reached, such as plans from Tello, Hello Mobile, and Mint Mobile. Typically, these 2G data speeds are around 256 or 128 kilobits per second. T-Mobile's international roaming data is also capped at these speeds. And finally, we have 64 kilobits per second. This is just slow, and honestly, I hope no plans use this. You can see these various data speed caps confirmed by the Ookla speed test application. And fun fact, this video was filmed way back in June 2016 for a carrier that was interested in learning how the various data speed caps would impact performance for various tasks and how it would impact the user experience. So let's find out. First up is a basic sending and receiving email test. All speeds pretty much pass this with flying colors. This was a small text-based email that was only a few kilobytes and didn't take long to send or receive. The only speed that had problems with this was the 64 kilobit per second throttle. It was surprisingly slow. Next up, I tried receiving a picture email. You can see LTE finished first here. It only took 2.8 seconds to download and display the picture. Next was the 512 kilobit per second speed. For some reason, the picture loading animation didn't display, but you can see it does load next here. And there it is, coming in at 18.3 seconds. Now, if I speed up the footage by 8 times, you can see the 256 kilobit per second speed finishes next with a time of 34.3 seconds. The 128 kilobit per second speed finishes with a time of 1 minute 13.4 seconds. And the 64 kilobit per second speed takes the longest, finishing up with a time of 2 minutes 34.8 seconds. Next up, I tried sending the same image at full size. For this test, you can see a blue progress bar at the bottom of the screen, and I timed the test from the moment I hit the send button to the moment that progress bar disappeared. Per usual, we have LTE finishing first here at 18.7 seconds, 512 kilobits per second finishing next at 23.7 seconds, 256 kilobits per second finishing at 49.6 seconds, and then again, speeding up the footage by 8 times, and we have 1 minute 40.6 seconds for the 128 kilobit per second speed cap, and lastly, the 64 kilobit per second speed cap taking the longest at 3 minutes 18.3 seconds. For the next test, I did something similar. I tried sending the photo in iMessage. iMessage is typically one of the features that will continue working even on 2G or 3G speeds. Okay, so we have LTE finishing first here at 12.5 seconds, 512 kilobits per second finishing next at 15.7 seconds, 256 kilobits per second finishing at 34.2 seconds, 128 kilobits per second finishing with a time of 1 minute 11.4 seconds, and lastly, as you'd expect, 64 kilobits per second, even sped up by 8 times, still takes a while. And it does finish up here as we wait for it sometime soon. It's almost there. And there it is with a time, a very long time of 5 minutes, 26.1 seconds. Next up, I did a YouTube test. I know a lot of people love streaming YouTube videos to have in the background or for music, and I wanted to see how long it would take for a YouTube video to start playing. LTE was plenty fast here, playing the video after just 2.2 seconds. Next up was the 512 kilobit per second speed. This saw a surprising jump in time though, so it took 16.9 seconds for the video to start on the 512 kilobit per second speed, and again, speeding up the footage by 8 times, we have the 256 kilobit per second speed finishing with a time of 43.6 seconds, the 128 kilobit per second speed, which actually failed to load the video info, which was interesting, but it still played the video after a time of 2 minutes and 20.4 seconds, And then lastly, we have the 64 kilobit per second speed, taking a full 3 minutes and 52.2 seconds to even start playing the video clip. Next, I loaded the text-based website reddit.com. The 512 kilobit per second speed loaded first with a time of 1.1 seconds, and then we had the 256 kilobit per second speed with a time of 1.8 seconds, before finally we had the LTE speed finishing with a time of 2.2 seconds. And then for the last two tests, we had a pretty big jump in time. 128 kilobit per second speeds loaded at 13.1 seconds, and in last place, 64 kilobit per second speeds loaded the website after 22.2 seconds. For more complex websites with text, images, and animations, like the Apple website, LTE loaded the fastest at 1.5 seconds. I actually forgot to test the 512 kilobit per second speed here, and then the rest of the speeds took much longer to load. The extra data in the images is what causes these web pages to take longer. And this can be not only on Apple's website, but any e-commerce site where you typically want to see images of the product. You do have the 128 kilobit per second speed finishing at 18.5 seconds, and then the 256 kilobit per second speed, I think it actually got hung up loading either the main image or some other component of the website. We even had the 64 kilobit per second speed test technically finishing the entire page first, with a time of 41.1 seconds. And then the 256 kilobit per second speed finally loaded everything after 1 minute, 5.1 seconds. So as you can tell from the past two tests, pretty much all speeds do work to some degree for web browsing, but I would definitely prefer, I'd say, having at least 256 kilobit per second speeds or faster for a better web experience. Next up, I did a music streaming test, and because it is important to hear the songs play and how long it takes them to load, I'm actually gonna cut back to the original footage and let the younger 2016 Stetson finish the video. And for all of them, they pretty much started playing at the same time. LTE, everything worked great, sounded excellent. The 512 kilobit per second speed, again, everything worked great, sounded excellent. Again, at 256 kilobits per second, everything worked great, sounded excellent, and loaded. For music, things really started to break down at the 128 kilobit per second mark. You can see the music starts playing, but then pauses and does not stream fluently enough. So if you are streaming music, you are going to need at least 256 kilobits per second of download speed in order for there to be no playback issues. Okay, that wraps up this video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it interesting, and I'll see you next time.